"Don't let them take me," the boy whispered, his voice barely a breath, but enough to shatter everything Renee Carter thought she knew about herself. In the chaos of a bustling summer fair, a young woman working a drink stand becomes the only person who notices a filthy, terrified boy collapsed on the sidewalk. While others pass him by, Renee risks her job, and possibly her safety, to protect him. What she doesn't know is that this boy's past holds a chilling secret, and his mother is one of the most powerful women in the city. What begins as an impulsive act of kindness sets off a chain of events that propels Renee from invisible intern to international changemaker. But the question remains, can a girl from a juice stand really shake the very rooms that once ignored her? Now, before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We share powerful, meaningful stories like this every day. And drop a comment below to let us know where you're watching from. Thank you, and now, let's get back to the story. Don't move, kid. Just breathe. Just breathe. Renee Carter didn't even realize the words had left her mouth until she heard them echo beneath the canvas canopy. Her hands trembled, one still gripping a dripping bottle of spring water, the other hovering near the boy's cheek. The sound of the Brighton Falls Summer Fair thundered on around her. Calliope music, sizzling fryers, the sticky sweet chaos of laughter and footsteps. But right there, under the faded awning of Sunny Zest Juice Co., time stopped. The boy didn't respond. He couldn't have been more than 12. His skin, pale and sunburnt, was smeared with grime. His blonde hair clung to his forehead in tangled knots. His clothes hung off him in tired, filthy layers. A shirt torn at the collar, jeans soaked at the cuffs, and shoes that looked like they'd been pulled from a dumpster behind a thrift store. He wasn't sitting. He was slumped, half on the curb, half on the asphalt, his ribs rising in erratic, shallow breaths. And no one had stopped. Not one soul. Renee had been mid-shift when she spotted him. She'd just handed a sweating mother of three a mango citrus cooler when her gaze flicked across the crowd and locked on the motionless body just outside the main square. At first, she thought maybe the boy was resting. Then she saw how his arm had fallen beneath him, twisted unnaturally. She saw his fingers twitch once, then stop. The mother thanked her. Renee didn't answer. She didn't even hear. Her feet were already moving. Her manager's voice cracked behind her like a whip. "Renee, where the hell are you going? We've got a line." "Hey," she ignored it. 2 steps. 4. The moment she crossed the invisible boundary of the booth and stepped into the flow of the festival crowd, she knew she'd crossed more than just vinyl matting. She'd crossed into something she couldn't walk away from. Now, kneeling beside the boy, her knees digging into sun-baked pavement, Renee gently tilted the bottle of water toward his lips. "Come on," she murmured. "You've got this." Just a little sip. Still nothing. A woman pushing a stroller slowed nearby, wrinkled her nose, then kept walking. A group of teenagers with slushies paused, stared, then snorted before snapping a picture and strolling off. One man in khaki shorts and a polo muttered loud enough for her to hear. "Probably a scam. Don't fall for it." Renee's blood boiled. She glanced up, lips parted to fire back, but stopped herself. Her focus snapped back to the boy. "Please," she whispered. "Just blink. Move. Give me something." His eyelids fluttered, just barely. Renee exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked around, heart pounding. There was no medical tent in sight, no security. Her booth, the one she'd just abandoned, stood a few dozen yards away. She could still hear her manager cursing into his phone. "I'll get fired for this," she muttered, and somehow she didn't care. Gritting her teeth, Renee slid her arms under the boy's shoulders. He was light. Too light. Like his bones were made of paper and his skin was barely holding them in. As she stood, his head lolled against her collarbone. She staggered once, regained her footing, and moved quickly, ducking beneath the strings of sun-bleached festival flags and weaving past confused festival-goers. By the time she reached the booth, her manager was waiting, red-faced and livid. "Are you kidding me?" he roared. "You walked off in the middle of a rush. Orders are backed up, people are leaving, and now, what the hell is this? You bring a vagrant back to my booth?" Renee didn't stop walking. She slipped behind the counter and gently lowered the boy onto the shaded wooden bench beside the cooler. "He needs help," she said, voice sharp. "He needs to be someone else's problem." Her manager snapped, jabbing a finger at the kid. What if he's high? What if he's dangerous? Or worse, what if this is some kind of act? You think you're a hero. You think you get to put the business at risk for this. Renee grabbed another water bottle, cracked it open, and tilted it to the boy's lips. This time he swallowed, slowly, tentatively. But he did it. His eyes, cracked with red, hollowed with exhaustion, opened just enough to meet hers. And what she saw there didn't look like a con. It didn't look like addiction or rebellion or theatrics. It looked like terror. "Drink more," she whispered, handing him a small pack of crackers. "You're safe. You hear me?" He didn't speak, just nibbled at the cracker like he hadn't tasted food in days. The manager had stopped yelling, for now. But Renee could feel the storm brewing behind her. Customers were staring, whispers were flying, phones were already out. She knew she was a viral video waiting to happen. Fast food girl saves homeless kid, or local festival worker goes off script. But she didn't move, because no one else had stopped. No one else had knelt beside this boy. No one else had seen the human being underneath the dirt and sweat and silence. So she stayed. She pressed a damp napkin to his forehead, tried not to flinch at the heat radiating from him. Heat like fever, like infection. She glanced around again, searching for a first responder, a police badge, even a volunteer lanyard. Nothing. Then something changed. The breeze shifted, and with it came a coldness that didn't belong in the July air. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it pulled at her spine, made the hairs on her arms rise, and then she saw them. 2 men, walking through the crowd like ghosts slicing through fog. Not dressed for the weather. One in a black hoodie pulled low over his eyes, the other in a thick flannel shirt with sleeves rolled just enough to reveal tattoos up his arms. They didn't look around, didn't smile, didn't weave or dodge like the others. Their eyes were locked on the boy. Renee's throat went dry. The boy's body tensed against her side. His cracker fell from his hand. And then, in a voice so faint she almost missed it, he whispered, "Don't let them take me." That was all it took. Renee stood slowly, placing herself between the men and the bench. They didn't speed up, didn't say anything, just kept moving forward. And as the boy's tiny fingers gripped the hem of her apron like a lifeline, Renee Carter felt something ignite in her chest. A mix of fury, instinct, and fear. Not for herself, but for him. Because whatever this boy had seen, whatever he'd run from, whatever nightmare had led him here, it wasn't over yet. And she was the only one who dared to look. The taller man spoke first. His voice was too smooth, too calm, like syrup hiding something sharp. "Sorry to bother you, miss," he said, forcing a grin. "That boy there, he's our nephew. Wandered off this morning, scared us half to death." Renee didn't move, her arms instinctively extended, shielding the boy who now clung to her side like a shadow. Behind her, the kid's shallow breaths picked up again. Quick, panicked. His grip on her apron cinched tighter. She studied the men. Not just their clothes or their stance, but their energy. The way they didn't blink. The way their eyes kept darting, not with relief or concern, but calculation. The man in the flannel shirt gave a stiff, almost rehearsed chuckle. "Appreciate you helping him out, but we can take it from here." Still, Renee didn't budge. "What's his name?" she asked. The question cut through the air like a blade. For a moment, neither man answered. Then they exchanged a glance, subtle, dangerous. The taller one's smile faded. "Sorry, what?" "Your nephew," Renee said again, louder this time. Her voice had an edge now, sharpened by adrenaline. "What's his name?" The shorter man, flannel sleeves twitching, inked fingers scratching at his jaw, shifted uncomfortably. "Look, lady," he growled, "this ain't your business. Just hand him over." All around them, the Brighton Falls Fair churned on, oblivious. A child tugged on cotton candy. A woman bartered at a jewelry stand. Music spilled from the stage, cheerful and detached. But here, just feet from a drink booth decorated in sunflowers and plastic lemons, stood a girl, a boy, and 2 men wrapped in something far darker than the summer heat. The boy didn't speak. He didn't need to. His body was trembling, and Renee knew in that moment, knew that if she gave him up, he would disappear forever. She reached behind her without turning, fingers wrapping around the nearest object. A full cup of lemonade, still sweating from the ice. And before she could second-guess herself, she hurled it. The cup struck the man in the flannel shirt square in the chest. Lemonade exploded across his torso, dripping down to his boots. "What the hell?" Renee stepped in front of the boy, feet planted wide. Her voice cracked through the fair like a thunderclap. Get away from him. Heads turned. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Music faltered. He doesn't belong to you, she shouted, pointing directly at the men. They don't even know his name. The taller man's expression hardened. His hand twitched at his side, but he didn't move. They both stood there, rigid. Then, like predators interrupted, they slowly backed away. No threat. No lunge. Just a quiet, calculated retreat into the crowd, eyes never leaving hers. And just like that, they were gone. But the fear? That lingered. People were staring, some whispering, some recording. Renee was still shaking. Her arms dropped to her sides, and she looked down at the boy, who had tucked his face into her shirt. She placed a hand on his head gently. They're gone. You're okay. Not seconds later, the booth curtain flew back. Her manager stormed through, his face crimson with fury. What in God's name are you doing? Renee turned toward him slowly. I was protecting him. Protecting him, he bellowed. From who? You just assaulted 2 customers. You threw lemonade in front of the crowd. They weren't customers. They were following him. They didn't even know his. I don't care, he shouted, jabbing a finger inches from her face. This is a business, Renee, not a shelter, not your personal rescue mission. You've scared people, embarrassed the brand, and made a damn spectacle of yourself. Renee blinked. The silence between his words rang louder than the noise of the fair. You're done, he spat. Get out. Now. She didn't argue, she didn't beg. She turned her back, grabbed her weathered backpack from the crate, and reached for the boy's hand. He followed her without hesitation. No one clapped, no one offered to help, no one defended her. Together they walked away from the lemonade booth, the blinking festival lights, and the taste of cotton candy and corn dogs that now felt cloying in the back of her throat. She didn't look back. Her cheeks burned. Her hands trembled. She'd lost her job. Again. But worse than that was the bitter realization that doing the right thing came with no parade, no reward, just silence and judgment. Still, she didn't regret it. The boy followed quietly, step for step, like a shadow that had finally found something solid to cling to. They wandered through the thinning crowd, away from the rides and vendors, down a side street that led to the edge of the fairgrounds. Past a line of vendor trucks and carnival trailers, Renee spotted an old wooden bench nestled beneath the wide arms of an oak tree. Its leaves whispered in the breeze like the tired sighs of forgotten summers. She sat down heavily, elbows on knees, rubbing her face. Her heart was still racing, her thoughts tangled. The boy sat beside her, still silent, still close. After a minute, she looked over at him. I don't know who you are, she said softly, but you were scared. And those men, they didn't feel right. He didn't respond, just stared ahead, eyes hollow. Then, slowly, he reached into the pocket of his dirty jeans and pulled out a wrinkled, stained scrap of paper. He held it toward her with a shaking hand. Renee took it, confused. It was barely legible, faded, crumpled. But she made out the ink. A phone number, scrawled in large, childlike handwriting. You want me to call this? She asked. He nodded. She took out her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. Is this your family? Another nod. Renee hesitated for half a second, then tapped call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Click. A woman's voice answered, tight, breathless, barely controlled. Hello? Renee's voice faltered for the first time. Hi, I know this is going to sound strange. I'm here with a boy, blonde hair, maybe 12. He looks like he's been through hell. He gave me this number. There was silence, then a sharp gasp. A thud, like something fell to the floor. Oh my God, the voice whispered, cracking with emotion. Oh my God, that's my son. That's Chase. Where is he? Where are you? Renee blinked. She looked at the boy. Chase. He met her gaze, for the first time since they'd met, and she saw it. Not fear, not panic, but relief. We're near the back gate of the Brighton Falls Festival, she said quickly. Near the chapel. He's safe. But please, come soon. We're on our way, the woman cried. Please, don't let him out of your sight. Don't let anyone near him. We're coming, right now. The line went dead. Renee lowered the phone slowly, staring at the boy in a new light. You're not homeless, she murmured. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everything about his silence now made sense. The torn clothes, the fear, the way he'd vanished into himself. He wasn't begging. He was surviving, running, hiding. And now, being found. They didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes. Maybe less. but time warped in strange ways when you were sitting beneath a tree with a half-starved child and your life unraveling thread by thread. Renee Carter could hear her pulse in her ears, louder even than the hum of generators from the fairgrounds. Beside her, Chase had gone still again, but this time it wasn't terror, it was something quieter, like his body had finally let go of its grip on survival, at least for a moment. Then she heard it. Not the buzz of carnival rides, not the echo of laughter, something different. A low, clean rumble, controlled, precise. Not the sputter of old engines, but the measured thrum of machines that had never known rust or wear. She looked up. 4 black SUVs slid around the corner, moving like a caravan that didn't need directions. Windows tinted, chassis spotless. As they pulled up along the curb, Renee could feel every eye on them, even from blocks away. The crowd at the fair hadn't seen what happened, but they would feel this shift in energy. The world around her was about to change. Doors opened in unison. Men in tailored suits stepped out first, 5, maybe 6 of them. Broad-shouldered, clean-cut, the kind of presence that didn't need to carry weapons to be considered dangerous. Their earpieces gleamed under the sun. One of them raised a wrist mic, murmuring something Renee couldn't hear. Another pointed toward the oak tree. Renee straightened instinctively, placing a hand over Chase's shoulder. Then the last car door opened, and from it stepped a woman. She didn't rush, she didn't panic. She moved like the ground itself bowed beneath her heels. She looked to be in her early 40s, though the elegance in her posture made age irrelevant. Her cream silk blouse clung softly to her frame, uncreased despite the heat. Tailored navy slacks, heels that looked custom-made, clicking gently against the pavement like a heartbeat. Sunglasses hit her eyes for 1 second. Then, with a swift motion, she removed them. That's when Renee saw her face. Eyes, hazel, fierce, and wet with tears. Not the kind of tears that made you weak, but the kind you held back through meetings and flights and midnight calls and couldn't stop once the dam cracked. She locked eyes with Chase, and her mask shattered. "Chase," she whispered. The name broke in the middle like her voice couldn't hold it together. The boy stood. He moved on his own, no prompting, no fear, just that deep, magnetic pull only a child and a mother can ever share. When she reached him, they collapsed into each other. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't pretty, it was real. She fell to her knees right there on the sidewalk in her designer clothes, arms around him so tightly. Renee wondered how they were still breathing. He held her back just as fiercely, face buried in the crook of her neck. No words. Just the gasps of a mother who had nearly lost everything, and the exhale of a boy who had finally been found. Renee stood frozen. She didn't want to intrude on something so sacred, but her legs wouldn't move. Her breath caught in her chest. She saw the woman rocking him gently, whispering words only he could hear. One of the suited men approached quietly and placed a water bottle and a cloth towel on the bench. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. After long minutes, Chase finally looked up. Then he turned, still holding his mother's hand, and walked to Renee. This time his voice wasn't a whisper. It was hoarse, steady, small, but full of will. "I ran away," he said. Renee blinked. "From what?" she asked softly. He looked up at his mother, who gave a quiet nod of permission. Chase drew in a breath. "We were on a trip, our cabin, in the hills. I got bored and went down to the creek. Just wanted to fish." His gaze dropped. "I didn't go far, but someone must have been watching." He swallowed hard. "They grabbed me, covered my face. I woke up in a room, no windows, just one door, locked. I could hear music sometimes, faint, like it was far away. I thought I was dreaming." Renee's throat tightened. "This morning, they forgot to lock the door, or maybe thought I was too weak to run. I waited until I couldn't hear them, and I just ran, toward the music, toward people." He looked up at her again. "Then I saw you, and I thought maybe someone would help." Renee's vision blurred. She turned her head as Chase's mother finally rose to her feet. A few curls had slipped from her elegant bun, clinging to her damp temples, but she didn't fix them. Her eyes were locked on Renee now, piercing, full of something more complex than gratitude. She extended a hand. "I'm Vivienne Hale," she said, her voice composed but soft. "You must be the one who called me." Renee Carter." Vivienne stepped forward and took both of Renee's hands. "We had no idea where he was. The police searched all night. So did drones. Dogs. You were the only one who saw him. Really saw him. I couldn't walk away. That matters, Vivian said, more than you know. A long pause. I'd like to speak with you privately, if you're willing. Renee hesitated, not out of fear, but because she still wasn't sure where she belonged in any of this. She was the juice stand girl, the one with syrup stains on her apron. This world, black SUVs and earpieces and million-dollar heels, wasn't hers. But Chase looked up at her, nodded. And that was enough. She said yes. They drove a few blocks away in one of the SUVs to a quiet private lot behind a boutique hotel where the press and crowds couldn't follow. Inside, a suite waited. Calm lighting, wide chairs, fresh fruit on the table. Chase curled on a sofa, already nodding off, wrapped in a blanket. Renee sat across from Vivian, and for the first time, someone asked about her. Not about her grades, not about her resume, not about her attitude. Just, tell me your story. So she did. She told Vivian about the dreams she folded into notebooks at night, about her mom working 2 jobs, about losing the lemonade stand job she hadn't even liked but couldn't afford to lose. She didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just spoke. Vivian didn't interrupt. When Renee finished, Vivian stood. You've lost something today, she said gently, but let's see what tomorrow brings. The morning arrived like any other, quiet, gray, and filled with the familiar hum of city life drifting through the cracked window of their tiny apartment. Renee Carter sat on the edge of her narrow bed, barefoot, staring down at her sneakers. They were old, frayed at the soles, one of the laces knotted together after snapping last year. She'd cleaned them the night before, almost instinctively, not knowing why. Maybe because it was the only thing she could control. Maybe because it made her feel normal. Her mother hummed softly from the kitchen, the clink of a spoon against porcelain echoing in the small space they shared. It should have been comforting. But something in Renee's world had shifted. Quietly. Irrevocably. She had done the right thing, of that she was certain. But right didn't pay the rent. Right didn't get her job back. Right didn't erase the fear on her mother's face when she'd come home the night before with red eyes and shaking hands, explaining that she'd lost the booth shift. Her mother had just nodded, her silence a blanket Renee couldn't quite fold herself into. She didn't sleep. Not really. Just lay awake and thought about Chase. His eyes, his silence, his hand in hers, and that woman, Vivian Hale. The way she'd stood. The way the air changed when she entered a room. Don't regret it, Renee whispered to herself. Don't you dare. Then came the knock. 3 precise raps on the front door. She flinched. Renee, her mother called from the kitchen. There's someone at the door for you. Her breath caught. Who is it? I don't know. He's wearing a suit. Renee stood too fast, her legs ached from the long shift. Her hands were clammy. At the door stood a man she recognized instantly, one of the ones from the black SUVs. Still impeccably dressed. Still unreadable behind his mirrored glasses. But this time he held no earpiece, no orders, just an envelope. It was white, thick, and embossed with her name in deep blue script. Miss Renee Carter. He didn't speak, simply bowed his head, extended the envelope, and stepped aside. Behind him, parked silently along the curb, was the same SUV from the night before, idling like it had never left. Renee stared at the envelope. Her fingers moved before her brain caught up. Inside were 3 things. First, a handwritten letter. Blue ink, graceful loops, unmistakably Vivian Hale's hand. Renee, you stood when no one else did. You listened, you believed, and because of that, my son is home. We had a long night as a family, and you were a part of that conversation. I hope this helps you take your next steps, not because you need saving, but because you deserve to soar. Vivian Hale. Renee's hands trembled as she unfolded the next page. An official acceptance letter. Briarfield University. Full academic scholarship, full housing, living stipend. The same university whose catalog she had folded and refolded until the spine creased. The one she had kept under her mattress like a secret prayer. The one she had dreamed about but never dared speak aloud. Taped to the page was a summer internship offer, Calder Equity Group. Paid, real, prestigious, and beneath it all, tucked so subtly she almost missed it, was a check. A check large enough to cover every bill in their house. A semester's tuition if she declined the scholarship. A cushion big enough to breathe, really breathe, for the first time in her life. Renee didn't cry. Not at first, she just stood there, still in her pajamas, barefoot on the tile, holding her future in her hands like it might crumble under the weight of hope. "Renee?" Her mother's voice was softer now, closer. She stepped into the doorway and froze. Her eyes scanned the letter, the check, the man at the curb. "What? What is this?" Renee blinked back the sting. "I think it's the start." She stepped outside, the warm breeze brushing her cheek, the city still humming around her. The man in the suit nodded as she passed. "Tell her thank you," Renee said quietly. He smiled, just faintly. "She says it every hour. You just don't hear it." Renee stood on the sidewalk, clutching the envelope to her chest. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to find out. She looked down at the letter one last time, then out toward the horizon glowing in the early light. She wasn't just a girl behind a juice booth anymore. She was a girl who made a choice when no one else did. And someone had noticed. 3 weeks later, Renee Carter stood in the gleaming marble lobby of Calder Equity Group's headquarters, 27 floors of glass, steel, and whispered fortunes. She had taken 3 buses to get here, woken up at 5 a.m., even though orientation wasn't until 8. Her second-hand blazer itched, her heels pinched, and the ID badge clipped to her lapel felt too heavy for a laminated card. But none of that stopped her from standing tall. She could still hear her mother's voice from that morning, spoken with trembling pride as she adjusted the collar on Renee's shirt. "Don't shrink in there. You earned this. Even if they don't see it right away, you walk like you belong." So that's exactly what she did. Still, as the elevator doors closed behind her with a soft ding, and she was surrounded by suits who smelled like cedar and wore watches worth more than her yearly rent, her lungs fluttered. "Calder's summer intern," someone behind her whispered, not unkindly. "The Hale girl's pick." Renee didn't flinch. Let them talk. Vivian Hale hadn't just opened a door, she had put a spotlight on Renee's name. And people noticed. That came with both privilege and pressure. When the elevator stopped at the 19th floor, everyone else stepped off first. She lingered for a second, alone, before taking a steady breath and following. The internship coordinator met her at the reception desk, clipboard in hand. Her smile was efficient, her handshake brief. "We don't typically bring in interns for summer placements, especially not without formal referrals." But Mrs. Hale insisted. Renee nodded politely. What she wanted to say was, "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for a scholarship or this internship or the check that still sits untouched in a drawer back home. I didn't ask to be noticed." But she said nothing, because deep down, she had asked. She had asked when she stood over Chase, shielding him from the men who lied. She had asked when she refused to walk away. She had asked with her actions, and the world had answered. Inside the meeting room, everything gleamed. Coffee stations with polished carafes, framed financial accolades lining the walls, a view of the city that stretched out in every direction, like a promise wrapped in glass. She was introduced to a dozen people. Analysts, junior partners, executive assistants. She nodded, smiled, took notes, remembered faces. But one moment stood out. A woman, maybe early 30s, with sharp red lipstick and sharper heels, approached Renee by the copy station. Her blouse was silk. Her eyes held something unreadable. "You're the one who found Chase Hale," she said, sipping her coffee. Renee hesitated. "I didn't really find him. He found me." The woman nodded slowly. "Well, however it happened, you became very important to some very important people, very quickly." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Just be careful. This place doesn't always reward good deeds the way the press likes to pretend." And with that, she walked away. Renee stood frozen, the hum of the copier filling the space behind her. She felt the words sink in, settle under her skin. This world, this towering corporate palace, had its own rules. Good wasn't always rewarded here. Not with kindness, anyway. But then she remembered Chase's face when he saw his mother. She remembered his small hand wrapped around her apron and the way he whispered, "Don't let them take me." That was the only rule that had mattered. The rest? She'd learn. The rest of the day passed in a blur of forms, IT logins, introductions, and quiet whispers in break rooms. But the ending came like a ribbon tied around the chaos. Just as she was gathering her things to leave, a voice called out, "Miss Carter?" She turned. It was Vivian. Not in cream silk this time, but navy. Still immaculate, still powerful. I didn't expect to see you today, Renee said, surprised. I try to keep a light touch with new interns, Vivienne replied, stepping closer. But I wanted to see for myself how you were settling in. Renee hesitated. It's different. Vivienne's eyes softened. I meant what I said. You weren't given this out of pity, Renee. You were seen. You stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. That kind of character doesn't fade in boardrooms. It shapes them. There was a pause. Then Vivienne added, more quietly, there are people here who won't understand why you're here. Who'll think I'm grooming a project. She reached out and gently adjusted Renee's ID badge. Let them think that, while you build something greater. Renee swallowed hard. Thank you, she said quietly. Vivienne smiled, this time genuinely. Don't thank me yet. Come back tomorrow, and the day after that. That's how you thank me. She turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and one more thing, she added over her shoulder. When you're in the elevator tomorrow, don't linger. Renee tilted her head. Why? Vivienne's smile turned playful. Because one day you'll be the one they wait for. Renee's second week at Calder Equity Group started with rain. Not a thunderstorm, just a quiet, misty drizzle that turned the streets silver and soaked the edges of her worn heels as she stepped off the last bus. The skyscraper loomed ahead like it always did, glass and steel and power, but today it felt colder, less welcoming. She shook off her umbrella in the lobby and smoothed the front of her blouse. She'd chosen a soft ivory one today. Pressed the night before, paired with black trousers her mother had hemmed at midnight. Clothes didn't make her invisible here, but they made her tolerable. The elevator ride was quieter today. People still watched her. Not unkindly, but with that clinical curiosity reserved for unfamiliar animals in familiar cages. That's the Hale intern. The girl from the fair, right? I heard she doesn't even go to school full-time, just some community college credits. She pretended not to hear, but her spine stayed straight. She reached her desk on the 20th floor and found a file waiting. A thick one, yellow-tabbed, printed, initialed. On top, a sticky note, need analysis by Friday, presentable enough to pitch. Welcome to the real work. JB was Julian Baer, senior partner. Cigar breath, gold cufflinks, and a reputation for turning interns into cinders with a single comment. Renee's hands tingled as she opened the file. It was a mid-tier acquisition review. Calder was considering a buyout of Fieldmore Tech, a small software firm based in Atlanta. The numbers were good. Too good. Suspiciously good. The financials looked polished to perfection. But that was exactly what made her pause. She stared at the numbers again. Something didn't feel right. By mid-afternoon, she'd combed through 3 years of statements and found what her gut had whispered all along. The valuation was inflated, not by a lot, but just enough to raise a red flag, especially in Q2 revenue projections. She ran it again. Triple-checked. Still off. Need help? A voice asked behind her. It was Caleb from finance, slick hair, gleaming shoes, the kind of guy who always looked like he was late to a yacht party. Renee hesitated, just reviewing the Fieldmore file. Caleb chuckled. Good luck, that thing's getting greenlit, no matter what you find. Bear's already on the golf course with their CEO. This is just box checking. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Pro tip? Don't try to make waves. Especially not with Julian Baer. Renee offered a polite smile, but something inside her began to coil. Because Caleb had just told her everything she needed to know. They didn't care if the numbers were wrong. The deal was already done. But she cared. Because she still remembered what it felt like to stand between a child and danger. To act even when no one else would. That instinct wasn't situational. It was who she was. And that night, long after most of the office had gone quiet, she was still there. Red pen in hand, spreadsheet glowing on her monitor, notes scribbled in the margins of a legal pad. She didn't know how to play their game. But she knew how to tell the truth. The next morning, she walked into the boardroom 5 minutes early. Baer didn't look up as she slid the folder onto the table. His cufflinks flashed as he waved her off. I said pitch ready, not annotated, he muttered. It is pitch ready, she replied calmly. But I flagged 3 inconsistencies in Fieldmore's projected growth model. That got his attention. Baer slowly raised his head. Inconsistencies? She nodded. Q2 of last year shows a 22% revenue spike. But the tech licensing fees that quarter only account for 4%. The remaining 18% appears to come from unverified regional contracts, none of which have been independently audited. Silence. Bear leaned back. And you verified this how? Cross-referenced their ledger with their IRS filings. The numbers don't match. Bear drummed his fingers on the table. Renee felt every eye in the room turn to her. Executives, analysts, all watching a line they assumed she'd just crossed. You're suggesting Fieldmore falsified revenue? Bear said, his voice silky. I'm suggesting they padded their valuation to attract a higher buyout. More silence. Then, laughter, not loud. Just Caleb, stifling a chuckle behind his hand. Bear stared at her like she was an insect that had wandered into the wrong terrarium. You're new here, Miss Carter, he said finally, and I respect due diligence. But this company didn't bring you in to grandstand. You're here to learn, to observe. Renee said nothing, but she didn't drop her gaze. Dismissed, he added sharply. Go. She gathered her things. Her hands didn't shake this time. That afternoon, she received a calendar update. Meeting request, Vivienne Hale. 3 p.m., Executive Suite 24B. Her heart stuttered. Vivienne was already seated when Renee arrived. A white mug rested between her hands, steam curling gently upward. I heard about the meeting, she said without preamble. I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone, Renee began. I know. Vivienne looked up. You were trying to protect the company. The truth. That's what we hired you for. Renee hesitated. It didn't feel that way. Vivienne smiled. But there was a weariness behind it. Julian Bear belongs to a different era, one that's ending, slowly but surely. What you did? That wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. She set her mug down, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. There was a long silence. Then Vivienne reached into her drawer and slid a sealed manila folder across the table. Renee opened it. Inside were notes, her notes, with added annotations, confirmations, and at the top, a printed memo. Pending hold on Fieldmore acquisition, further financial review ordered. Renee looked up stunned. Vivienne met her eyes. I reviewed everything you found. Quietly, independently, you were right, and now the board knows it. But Bear will adapt or leave. Renee couldn't breathe for a second. You didn't just hold the line, Vivienne said. You moved it. That night, as Renee rode the elevator down alone, she caught her reflection in the mirrored steel. Same clothes, same shoes. But she was no longer the girl behind the juice stand. She was the girl who spoke when no one else dared. And this time, they listened. 2 days after the Fieldmore deal was quietly paused, Renee Carter's name began circulating through corridors she had never entered. First, in whispers. Then in emails. Then, officially. It started with a brief message from HR. Please confirm attendance at this Friday's Rising Voices breakfast. You've been nominated as our featured intern speaker. She reread it twice. There had to be a mistake. She was just the intern with the red pen and a nervous smile. She wasn't the type to be given microphones. She was the type who barely got her foot in the building. But then came a second message, from Vivienne Hale herself. You're not being rewarded, Renee. You're being recognized. Those are different things. Speak, not for them, for yourself. The Rising Voices breakfast was an internal event Calder hosted once a quarter. Part mentorship, part PR theater. A room full of mid-level execs, partners, and curated media. Normally, it featured a keynote from someone already polished by years of practice. A safe voice, a known face, but this time, it would be her. And everyone knew why. Friday came too fast. Renee spent the night before rewriting her speech 3 times and throwing up once. Not from nerves exactly, but from the weight. The moment felt too big. She wanted to tell the truth, but not embarrass the people who'd opened doors. She wanted to be bold, but not reckless. She wanted to be real, but feared being too real. She arrived at the rooftop lounge early, wearing her best blouse and the only blazer she hadn't spilled coffee on. Her curls were pulled back tight. Her palms damp, the view stretched endlessly. All of downtown shimmered in gold beneath a cloudless sky. Rows of folding chairs filled with people she'd never met, name tags, lanyards, a clear podium, and beside it, Vivienne, smiling with that same quiet fire Renee had come to recognize. You ready? She asked. No, Renee whispered. Vivienne's smile deepened. Good, the right ones never are. They called her name just after breakfast was cleared away. Please welcome our featured voice, intern Renee Carter. Polite applause, a few curious glances, a few familiar ones. Renee walked to the podium, her heart thumped like a second pulse in her throat. She looked down at her prepared speech, then looked up. and didn't read a single word of it. Instead, she folded the paper once, tucked it into her blazer, and cleared her throat. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she began. Her voice shook, but she let it. "I don't mean here at this podium. I mean here. In this building, in this world." The room stilled. 3 weeks ago, I was working a juice booth in the middle of a summer fair. I didn't have business cards or suits. I didn't even have a printer that worked. I had one pair of shoes, a mother who works night shifts, and a folder of scholarship dreams I didn't think anyone would ever read. She paused. The silence stretched wide. But then I saw a boy, and I saw that no one else saw him. Not really. And in that moment, I learned something I didn't expect. She leaned closer. "You don't need to be invited to do the right thing. You don't need credentials to be human. Sometimes all you need is to stop walking, to notice." There were no more phones buzzing now, no more forks clinking plates, just eyes, all on her. I thought doing the right thing might ruin my life. I lost my job. I lost income my family needed. But then I realized some things matter more than comfort. She looked directly at a woman in the front row who had been eyeing her name tag earlier. "We talk a lot in rooms like this about leadership, about value, about character, but I think we forget. Those things don't start with promotions or platforms." She held up her ID badge. "They start with one choice, and the courage to make it before anyone tells you you're allowed to." A long breath. "I'm not special. I'm not polished, but I am present. And I will never stop noticing the people this world teaches us to ignore." She stepped back from the mic. Silence. Then applause. Real, loud, sustained. Vivienne stood slowly and clapped. Others followed. Not everyone, but enough. Renee didn't smile, not fully. She just breathed. She just breathed. After the event, a young assistant named Natalie caught her in the hallway. "I've never seen someone do that," she said breathlessly. "Speak like that. You made me think of my own sister. She cleans houses. She's brilliant. No one's ever said what you just said. Thank you." Renee didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. Then she felt a presence behind her. Julian Baer. She turned. He gave a short nod. "I disagreed with your methods." She waited. "But you were right." Then he walked away. No smile, no warmth, but also no threats. That night, Renee sat at her apartment window, watching the lights of the city flicker like stars that had gotten lost and decided to stay. Her mother brought her a cup of tea and kissed the top of her head. "You didn't just walk through the door they opened," she said gently. "You made a path behind you." Renee didn't respond. She just held the warm mug and looked down at her hands. Hands that once passed out lemonade on hot July afternoons. Hands that once shielded a shaking boy from danger. Hands that, for the first time, were starting to build something. It came as an envelope. Not digital, not emailed, but hand-delivered, again by the same man in the charcoal gray suit who never seemed to blink. He appeared in the lobby like a shadow made of silk, stepped into the elevator like he owned it, and placed the envelope on Renee's desk without a word. The paper was heavier this time, embossed, a wax seal, navy with gold edges. It had no return address, just her name. Miss Renee Carter. She turned it over in her hands like it might disappear. By now, she knew what this meant. Not another thank you. This was something bigger. Her palms were already sweating when she peeled the seal open. Inside were 2 items. The first, a cream cardstock letter in Vivienne Hale's hand. "Renee, what you did at the breakfast was not brave because you spoke well. It was brave because you spoke honestly. That's a rarer skill than we admit in our industry. I watched a room shift because of you. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence required it. I believe that voice, your voice, deserves more than 15 minutes at a podium. That's why I'm inviting you to something few ever get the chance to do." Renee paused, then unfolded the second sheet. It was headed with the seal of the Global Women's Equity Initiative. A 3-week leadership retreat in Geneva, Switzerland. Invitation only, all expenses paid. A chance to train under policy leaders, CEOs, and world-class entrepreneurs. And she had a spot, if she wanted it. She stared at the signature on the bottom, Vivienne Hale, board chair. The words blurred in front of her, not because of the opportunity, but because of the fear rising behind it. That night, she sat across from her mother at the small table in their apartment, the envelope open between them. "Switzerland?" her mother whispered. "Switzerland? Like the one next to France?" Renee gave a half smile, The very same. Her mother blinked, then looked down at her hands. Hands calloused from long shifts, from carrying too many bags and wiping too many tears. Baby, she said softly, I'm proud of you. But I need to ask, what's holding you back? Renee hesitated. What if I get there and I don't belong? What if I open my mouth and everyone realizes I'm just the girl from the juice stand who got lucky? Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. You think the mountains care who climbs them? She said gently. You belong because you keep climbing anyway. A long pause. Then, you fought for your spot, not with money or names or connections, with courage. That travels. It carries across oceans. Trust it. Renee nodded slowly, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. I'm just scared, she whispered. Good, her mother said. That means you're not walking into something easy. It means you're growing. The next morning, Renee stood before Vivienne's office. No envelope. No pitch. Just her. Vivienne looked up from her desk and smiled. Well, I want to go, Renee said simply. But I need to ask something. Vivienne gestured for her to sit. I don't want to be your charity project or your corporate redemption story. Vivienne's smile deepened. Good, I don't need one. Renee met her eyes. Then what do you need? Vivienne leaned forward, elbows on her desk. I need the girl who stopped, who noticed, who fought, because she'll challenge the rooms that forgot how. Renee exhaled, then nodded. Then I'll go. 3 weeks later, she stood in an airport terminal with a crisp boarding pass, a new passport, and a suitcase that still smelled faintly of the detergent her mother used. The world stretched out in every direction, and for the first time in her life, Renee didn't just feel like she was stepping into the unknown. She felt like she was walking into her name. The summit room in Geneva was made of glass, gold, and gravity. High above Lake Geneva, in a conference space with floor-to-ceiling windows and imported crystal chandeliers, 25 of the world's most promising young leaders were seated in a horseshoe of cream leather chairs, each one hand-selected, each one already something extraordinary. There were Ivy League grads, tech startup founders, political prodigies, and heirs to old money legacies. And then, there was Renee Carter, a girl from a juice stand in Brighton Falls. She sat in her tailored navy blazer, a notepad in her lap and her badge tucked into the crook of her collar, trying not to focus on the fact that the woman seated 2 chairs down had once addressed the UN. It wasn't just intimidating, it was otherworldly. Their conversations moved fast, terms like global equity indexes, macro investment policy, and venture divestiture strategy flying around like confetti at a victory parade. Renee scribbled notes, nodded politely, smiled when prompted. But inside, she was quiet. Until she wasn't. It was the 3rd day of the retreat when it happened. A panel of economic leaders, 5 men and 2 women, took the floor to speak about sustainable profitability in emerging markets. One of the men, silver-haired and polished, spoke about streamlining investments in underdeveloped regions. Access and influence, he said. It's about knowing where to plant the flag first. The goal is to move fast, take control, and shape outcomes. The people, they'll adapt. Renee's pen froze. The people, he repeated with a smile, will adapt, they always do. The room chuckled lightly. Except for one seat, Renee slowly lifted her hand. Silence rippled across the floor. The panel looked at her. Yes, Miss Carter, the moderator asked. Her throat was dry, her hands were cold, but her voice, clear. Have you ever asked them? The room blinked. Asked who? The speaker replied, confused. The people, the ones you say will adapt. Have you ever asked them if they wanted the flag planted? Or if they wanted to be shaped at all? Now the silence had teeth. Renee felt her heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. But she didn't stop. I'm not an economist. I'm not an executive. But I am someone who's lived in a neighborhood that got redeveloped and watched local businesses disappear. I've watched investors unlock potential in ways that left families evicted and schools underfunded. So, when you say people will adapt, I just wonder, do you mean adapt or disappear? She looked around the room. No one moved. Even the UN girl was still. I'm not trying to attack anyone, she added, softer now. I'm just saying, maybe it's time we start measuring progress by the people who stay, not by the profits that leave. The panel didn't speak for a long beat. Then the moderator cleared his throat, gave a tight smile, and said, thoughtful perspective, let's take a short break. But the moment didn't disappear. Not this time. Because during the break, one of the program directors, a woman named Camila from São Paulo, came to sit beside her. "No one's ever asked that here," she said quietly. "I've been running these retreats for 10 years. That was the first time someone challenged the model." Renee looked down. "Should I not have?" Camila smiled. "You should always have." Later that night, while others went out for drinks and networking dinners, Renee stood alone on the rooftop terrace. The stars above Geneva didn't look like the ones in Brighton Falls. They were colder, sharper. But they shone just the same. Vivian had texted her after the session. "They won't forget today. Not because you were loud, because you were right." Renee replied only with a thank you. But her heart? It wasn't saying thank you. It was saying more truth, more voice, more space, not for her ego, but for every kid who'd been told they were too much or not enough in the same breath. Every mother who held the night together with 2 jobs and too little sleep. Every neighbor who got pushed out in the name of development. Every boy named Chase who was almost lost forever, because no one else had stopped. That night, Renee pulled out the old notebook she'd brought from home, the one with the dog-eared scholarship brochures and messy quotes from authors she'd never met. She turned to the back and wrote 6 words: ask, speak, stay, challenge, rise, build. Underneath, she added, "They planted flags. I plant roots." Then closed the book and watched the city. The plane touched down in the early hours of a Monday morning. The city skyline blinked dimly beneath a sleepy fog, as if even the buildings weren't ready to wake yet. But Renee Carter was wide awake, every sense humming with something she couldn't yet name. She stepped off the plane with her same old suitcase, a little heavier now with papers, books, and one small velvet box Vivian had given her as a parting gift. Inside was a tiny gold acorn pendant. Vivian's words echoed in her mind. "You don't need to burn down the forest, Renee. You just need to plant something stronger." She hadn't known what to make of it then. But now? She understood. Her mother met her at the airport with open arms and teary eyes, hugging her like she was still 17 and coming home from a sleepover. Except this time, Renee didn't feel like a kid who had gone away. She felt like a woman who had returned. Different. Rooted. Ready. Over the following weeks, word of her Geneva experience spread faster than she could keep up with. Calder Equity Group formally extended her internship into a permanent position, with a development track under Vivian herself. Articles trickled out. Mentions on LinkedIn. A blog post from Camila that quoted Renee's "plant roots" line went viral among social impact leaders. But Renee wasn't chasing any of that. She was chasing something else. It started one morning in a local cafe. A young girl with long braids and a hand-me-down hoodie tapped her shoulder nervously. Are you the girl who helped that boy?" Renee turned. Her voice was gentle. "I am." The girl's eyes sparkled. "My mom said you were brave. I want to be brave too." Renee knelt down and looked her in the eye. "You already are," she said. "Just keep noticing things. Keep speaking up. That's where it starts." That moment lit a spark she couldn't put out. Within a month, Renee launched a weekend workshop at the community center, the Table Project, a space where young women of color could gather, learn to speak publicly, manage finances, build resumes, share their fears, and, most of all, be heard. She called it the table because she was tired of people saying, "We need a seat at the table." Renee was done asking. She was building a new table, one that didn't require permission, one where the only entry requirement was courage. Chase visited once too. Vivian brought him one Saturday afternoon, quietly slipping into the back of the center just as a young girl was practicing her speech about starting a food pantry with her aunt. Chase had grown, his face fuller, his eyes brighter. He handed Renee a hand-drawn thank you card with stick figures, her, him, and Vivian standing beneath a giant lemonade stand. At the bottom, in crooked handwriting, were 3 words: "You saw me." Renee cried for the first time in months. Not because she was sad, but because it had finally hit her. That day under the canopy? That was the day she chose to become who she was meant to be. Months later, on the anniversary of that summer fair, a local reporter interviewed Renee for a feature titled "The Girl Who Changed the Game." They asked her what she remembered most about that day. She thought for a long moment. "The moment I didn't walk away," she said. "Not the scholarship? No. The internship." She shook her head. "Not even Geneva?" A pause. No, she said with a soft smile. The moment I crossed the booth line and stepped toward that boy, that was the moment my life started moving in the right direction. Not because I knew what would happen, but because I acted without knowing. The reporter leaned forward. What would you say to someone watching your story right now who's still stuck in that booth? Renee smiled wider. I'd say, the world won't always see you, but that doesn't mean you stop seeing. She looked directly into the camera. See the kid no one sees. Speak the truth no one wants to hear. Build the space no one invites you into. She leaned back. And when they tell you you don't belong, remember, you don't need permission to matter. That quote, it lives on now. Painted in bold colors on the wall of her community center. Printed on the back of every notebook handed out at her workshops. Etched into the minds of every young woman who walks through her doors thinking she's too small to make a difference. Because Renee Carter? She never went back to that juice stand. But she never forgot it either. It was the beginning, not the end. And as the sun set over the skyline one ordinary evening, casting long shadows across the windows of a new office she now worked in by day and the neighborhood center she mentored by night, Renee stood quietly in the doorway of the table, watching, smiling, planting. Sometimes all it takes is one small act of courage to change everything. Renee Carter didn't have power, wealth, or connections, just instinct and heart. When the world chose to look away, she stepped forward. And that one choice didn't just save a life, it created one. Her own. So the next time you see someone overlooked, someone forgotten, remember Renee, because when you act with integrity, speak with conviction, and build with purpose, you don't need permission to matter. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories, and drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. You matter. Your voice matters, and your courage can change the world.